So in today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through my full editing workflow for how I put my portrait images together. And that's everything from bringing the raw file into Affinity Photo to exporting it at the end. I'm going to be taking an image that looks like this and turning it into an image that looks like this. And if that sounds like something that could interest you, then make sure you stick around. And so without further ado, let's jump right into Affinity Photo and get on with the edit. Okay, and here we are in Affinity Photo then, and this is a picture of Freya. Now if you don't follow Freya, here's her Instagram handle. Her link is also in the description below. Definitely head over to Instagram and give her a follow. She's a great model. It was fantastic to work with her, and this was actually on a 1970s inspired boho shoot we did last year. So I was actually at this shoot as a videographer. I was invited along to make a film of the day, so I wasn't actually the main photographer on the day, but whenever I go on these styled shoots, I always use the opportunity to take some portraits, take some photographs at the same time. So here it is in Affinity Photo, and we've dropped into the raw develop persona. The first thing I'm going to do is come over to my basics panel, and I'm just going to play around with the exposure to expose the raw file exactly how I want it to look. So what I'm really looking at here is the histogram up the top here, and what I want is to keep the histogram off of the far left and the far right. Obviously I don't want to clip any blacks or clip any whites, so I'm just going to bump that exposure up a little bit. I always like to bring the black point down, maybe 3 or 4%, because I like to, in my workflow, I like to build the contrast back into the image so I can control how much is going in and out. I don't want to start with a lot of contrast. And then brighten up the whole thing, maybe about there. Okay, come down to my shadows and my highlights. Again, probably just lift the shadows just a touch. I'm going to pull those highlights down. So where are the highlights? Okay, so you can see that on the right hand side of the histogram, that's the limit of what I can do, but actually the highlights that are being affected really are the camper van here and the sky up here. So I'm not too worried about losing, I'm not too worried about losing that. It's not going to add too much to the image. Okay, then what I do is come over to my details, and I'm just going to add probably somewhere around 19 to 20% luminance. Now the last stage I will do is I'm going to crop the image. I'm going to come up here to a 5x4 because all my images end up on my Instagram, and so this is where this is going to go, so I might as well crop this straight away for Instagram. Now remember, if you're doing this for Instagram, you need to leave a little space at the top, because although we're doing it 5x4 or 4x5, when it goes on your grid is square, so it's 1x1. And so you'll lose a little bit off the bottom and a little bit off the top. And I always keep that in mind when I'm cropping my images, that I need to leave a little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom, so that when it's on my feed, Freya's face is not cut off in any way, shape or form. Okay, yeah, so then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna develop that. Okay, and here we are. So we're now in the photo persona, and we can start actually getting on with our edit. And so the first steps that I normally do is to clean the image up and get the base of the image looking how I want it, so I can then build on top of that image. So what does that include? That's going to include a bit of inpainting. I'm going to get rid of anything in the photo that's distracting. I'm going to clean the skin up, and I'm going to do some frequency separation, do some dodging and burning, again leveling up those skin tones. And then once that's done, I add a tone map to give me that first sort of little bit of crunch and that little bit of detail, and then from there, that's when I start manipulating my colours. And so let's get on with that right now then. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up to the background layer, and I'm going to duplicate it. So the reason we duplicate it and we leave the bottom layer locked is that if I get further down the line and I make some mistakes or I ruin the image, I've got my base image to go back to. I can delete everything else off, and I've got the image there as a safety net. And it also gives me something to refer back to. I can click all the layers off and be like, right, here's where I was, here's where I'm at now. Is it flowing? Is it going in the right way? Is it looking how I thought it would look? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this. I'm going to rename it Inpainting. I'm going to come over here to my Inpainting tool. Now, important thing to click here is you come up to current layer and below. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in. I try not to do anything to the skin tones at this point. I've got a different workflow for the skin tones, but what I'm looking at is anything distracting in the photograph that I want to get rid of, anything I want to paint out. Like I said, this wasn't a studio shoot, this was a sort of in the moment outside, and it was a very, very windy day, which is why you can see the hairs everywhere. So the hair might be a bit of a challenge, but I kind of like a lot of how the hair is looking. I like that kind of raw feel to it, that kind of 1970s look. So I don't want to take too many of the strands of hair away. I just want to sort of tidy up anything that's distracting from you know, the actual image itself. So things like this strand of hair here, so I'll make my brush a bit bigger. And Inpainting is a very powerful tool. I mean, sometimes it does get it wrong in Affinity, and you do have to sort of have a bit of a play with it. There you go, and that's taken that, take that bit out there. And so again, I'm gonna keep coming back out, and I'm just looking at what is catching my eye. So that, whatever, I don't even know if that's a strand of hair or a bit of wind. And I like to do this Inpainting in little steps, just because if it does then make some errors, it's very easy then to go back and change it. Now remember, with Inpainting, you don't just want to be taking away the hairs and stuff that are sticking out. You can also, things like this hair here, okay? So when you zoom out, actually as we pump colour and contrast in, that hair is going to become more and more distracting because it's running opposite to all the other hairs. You can see it's running across. And so what we can do is just Inpaint that hair. There you go, and that hair's gone and it blends in. Okay, you might then need to go in and just, see there's a little bit there, it's messed up, looks a bit. And all it's a case of is just going in and fixing these little issues that are going to become more, the more you edit the photo, the more they're going to become distracting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to carry on doing my Inpainting, and I'll catch up with you when it's finished. So here we go, my Inpainting is done then, and like I said, I haven't done too much to the image so far. It's just tidied up and taken away the real distractions, the things that when I initially looked at the photo, it really were distracting me. So if we do a before and after, so this is our original layer, and you can see probably the biggest differences I've done is remove a little bit of the detail from the camper van. The next stage then is I'm going to add another pixel layer, and we're going to name this Skin Cleanup. And then what I'm going to do is come over to where my Inpainting brush is, and I'm going to select the patch tool. Same thing, come up to current layer and below, because I want it to sample the layers below and give me more of a sample. And then what I'm going to do is start removing any major blemishes. An extra tip and something I always do is you come up to your adjustments panel, come to your black and white adjustment, and just pull down on the reds a little bit. And this is what this is going to do is highlight all the blemishes and differences in the skin. So as you can see, if I focus on Freya's face here and I take this layer off, now you can see a lot of what we're going to clear up. By turning it to black and white, you can then see things that you might not necessarily be able to see with the colour. So this is something I do with all my headshot and portrait work, and I'll change my approach to how I clean up the skin depending on what it is that I've been shooting. So if it's corporate headshot work, if it's commercial work and it's for business headshots, then I don't go too heavy on my adjustments because it should be a natural representation of that person. So realistically, the rule I go with is if it's not going to be there in 2 weeks' time, I remove it. So that's things like spots, blemishes, cuts, any makeup smudges, that kind of thing is all I remove. I leave all the features of the face on. I don't touch that. And so a beauty edit is slightly different because what we want to do is clean that skin up and make the model look as best we can make her. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a beauty edit today, and that's what my plan is for this photo. So what I'm now going to do is start my cleanup process for the skin. And so what I'm going to do is come down to and start on Freya's chin. And what I'm looking for, so say like there's a little blemish here. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw around that blemish. And then what we're going to do is move the mouse around and we're going to sample an area of skin we want Affinity Photo to overlay to mix that selection with. And then we click. And as you can see, there we go. And that selection is done. So if we take that on and off, you can see that that's removed the blemish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and clean up all of the skin, and I'll catch up with you when it's done. Okay, so I've just finished doing my cleanup of the skin and removing all the hairs and stuff that I don't want to see. So if I select all three of these layers, so as you can see, I do these in different layers. So I've got one layer for Inpainting, one layer for my skin cleanup, and then one for the hair removal. So here's how we started. This is the file we brought in, and here's it cleaned up. So as you can see, we've removed all the distractions, and now we're ready to sort of start balancing the skin up, or the way I do that is to create a frequency separation layer, and then I'm going to work between the two frequencies. Now, if you don't know what frequency separation is, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do a whole separate film on how to use frequency separation. But hopefully at this point, if you're here watching this, you do know what frequency separation is. So what I'm going to do now is create a stamp layer. So Command, Option, Shift and E creates the stamp layer, and then in this stamp layer we're going to come up to our filters panel and add frequency separation. Now I normally find around 5 pixels works the best. You can obviously move this to see your sharpness and the color, and obviously that's what frequency separation is. The lower frequencies are your color and the higher frequencies are your detail, and what you're really looking for is the amount of shadow that's being brought between the two. So that looks all right to me. I'm not someone that likes to work with the high frequency layer turned off. I prefer to leave it on so I can see what's happening underneath. If you're someone that finds it easier to take the high frequency off, so like this, then by all means, but that's not how I do things. So I've got my low frequency there. So with my low frequency selected, what I'll then do is add a pixel layer. And what that means is it's gonna drop it in between the low frequency and the high frequency. And that means I can make each of my changes again on different layers. And that means that I can manipulate those layers individually. And then if it all goes wrong or I make a mistake, I can delete that layer and I don't have to start the whole frequency separation process again. So let's come in here and let's look at our skin. So this could probably do with, we're going to balance the skin up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is paint straight onto this pixel layer and just mix the skin, paint in the colours of the skin so I can start balancing that skin out. So to do that I use a tablet and a pen, which is a really great tool to use, especially for this kind of dodging and burning and painting effects onto your image. So I'm going to come over here to paintbrush, I'm going to select my dodge and burn brush that I've manipulated. I'm going to come to my flow jitter, make sure that that's up so that my pen works. I'm then going to come to my color. Okay, so on my pen board I've got it mapped so that by pressing this button I can sample colors. So for instance I'm going to sample this color here, and as you can see up here it's made that color. Make sure that that color is selected, and then what I'm going to do is make my brush a little bit bigger, and then what I can do is just lightly start painting on the effect. And as you can see, I'm just pushing that color into sort of the highlights, and what I'm really looking for here is just to make the color of the face a little bit more even. I need to keep sampling the skin to create the nice transitions. And this is the advantage of using the pen, is that it's you can layer this in very lightly and not go too crazy with it straight away. You can really feather it in and blend it in. And obviously once we've completed the painting, we're then gonna make sure that it blends in a natural way. So I'll carry on doing my painting and balancing up the skin tones, and then I'll join you to show you how I make that look natural at the end. Okay, so here we are then, and I've just finished doing my painting. So if you just want to see the differences I've made, so I've just kind of roughly leveled out where I think the color needs to be pushed into. Okay, and it still looks a bit rough, but don't worry about that. So we're now going to come up to filters. I'm going to add a blur. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur. We're going to make this quite blurred, so probably around 36 pixels. And then what we're going to do is come up to the opacity, and we're going to, so probably around 70%, just to dial it back a bit. Okay, so before and after. So I've just leveled the color out over the face and then brightened it up a little bit just in the colors themselves. Okay, and the great thing about doing this in frequency separation is I haven't affected I'm just affecting the colors. I'm not affecting the detail in the skin. And so the next thing I'm going to do is a bit of dodging and burning. So I come down here to my adjustments panel, and I'm going to come up to curves, and I'm going to change the blend mode of this one to multiply, and this is going to be our burn channel, and we're going to invert that, burn, and then we're going to come down to curves again, and this one's going to go to screen, again invert that. Okay, what I'm then going to do is come to my color. I'm going to move all these up to the top here so that my color is white on my brush. So obviously because we've inverted these layers, we turn the layer to black, and we're then going to paint on in white to reveal that layer. And so what I'm going to do now is just dodge and burn. So what I normally do here is turn my black and white adjustment back on. Remember I brought those reds down earlier, I've kept that layer, and it's for this, so I can see all the little colour shifts and colour changes in the skin. And what I'm going to do is balance them up and then add any sort of lighting effects I want. Anything I want to accentuate or bring out is what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to do my dodging and burning now with the pen, and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so this is how my dodging and burning is looking at the moment, okay, and it looks pretty severe, doesn't it? Okay, but we're gonna level this down. So what we're gonna do, see, that's how it's looking in colour, this is how it's looking in black and white. So what we're gonna do is come up to filters, and we're gonna Gaussian blur, again, probably somewhere in the mid to high 30s, 37. I tend to stick, whatever I do with one, I do with the other, so repeat Gaussian blur for that. Okay, that's softened it. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna build up the effect until, I normally take it somewhere around 75%, I think looks good. Dodge layer, so build up those highlights. Again, I think around 75% looks pretty alright. We take the black and white layer off. Okay, so if I now highlight both of these layers and take them on and off, so this is how we started, and this is where we're looking at the moment. So you can see it's made a bit of a change to the face. I've changed how the lighting looks on the face and what areas are being highlighted. I've softened the highlights up a little bit. That at the moment to me is looking pretty good. And so what I'm going to do now is do another set of dodging and burning across the whole image. So that I'm going to concentrate on things like the clothing, the hair. I appreciate this is not the way that everyone does things, but this is my workflow and this is how I do it. And what that does is it gives me that first sort of layer of crunch to work with. It sort of controls where my contrast is going to meet later on down the line. I'm going to do a couple of other little touch-ups here and there. If and when I notice things, I'll go back to these layers and play around a little bit. So I'll see you right at the end when all the frequency separation layers are done, and I'll show you what I've been up to. Okay, so I've just finished up my frequency separation layer. So now what I want to do is show you the before and after. So this is before we started. So this is the image that's had the cleanups. We've done inpainting, skin cleanup, and hair removal. We've then done frequency separation, and this is now how we're looking. So as you can see, I've brought out certain highlights. I've dulled some down. I've pushed a few of the shadows back. I've sorted a few of the skin tones out, and I think this is looking pretty good. What we can now do is get rid of this black and white adjustment layer. We don't need that anymore. And what I'm now going to do is create another stamp layer. So Command, Option, Shift and E. Okay, this layer, we're then going to come up here and we're going to go to our tone map persona. So what we do is we let Affinity Photo figure out the tone map. Okay, and there's only two sliders I'm going to affect on this map, and that is the tone compression and the local contrast. So tone compression, you can see what that's doing. It's making certain areas of the image brighter and darker, so we can affect that, I think, around there. It's looking good. Let's give it a nice little bit of punch of brightness. And then your local contrast. Okay, and you can see how that affects the image. It's quite a severe effect. So what I like to do, now bear with me on this, is come to between 65 and 70% normally, and then just dial this in and out again. I actually think a little bit more would do. So yeah, about 70% on both. Okay, we're gonna hit apply. First thing I'm gonna do is gonna come to this little gear icon, okay? And that's gonna give me my blend options. And what I'm gonna do is take this, so if you don't understand or you don't know anything about blend options, leave me a comment in the section below and let me know, and I'll do a whole separate video on blend options. But realistically, this is the layer underneath, and this is the layer we're working on. So what I wanna do is pull the right hand side down. So again, this works very much like a histogram. You've got your shadows on the left, your midtones in the middle, and your highlights on the right. And it controls how much of the effect is applied to those areas of the image. So I don't want this effect applied to any of the highlights. So I drag the highlights all the way down. Tick off linear. So basically all linear does is it makes these lines really sharp. I don't like that. I like a gradual curve. And then what I'm gonna do is just pull it down like that, just so that it's then steady on the shadows and the midtones, and then comes off for the highlights. Okay, that looks good, so we can cancel off that. And then what I normally do is come down to either overlay soft light or hard light, depending on which one I think looks best. I think overlay actually for this looks pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is dial this all the way off and build that effect back into a point where I think it looks good, so probably, yeah, again, around 70%. So almost each stage, I like to make the effect heavier than I need it, and then scale it back, dial it back. Okay, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna group all of these together. And you may have seen this in some of my other videos, and this is what I call the base. So that's all my base changes to the image. I've now manipulated the image to a point where I'm gonna color it, contrast it, add any other effects, but my actual manipulating that image, the hard elements of the image for me is now done. That's why I call it base. That's my base layer done. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do then is we're gonna come to our adjustments panel, and I'm gonna add a curves layer. Now I come to the curves. Now I'm not going to touch the blend mode at all. I'm going to come to the master, and all I'm going to affect here is the red, green and blue channels. I'm going to go to red, and I'm going to put curves on these. So obviously if I pull the curve down, we're going to be adding blue. If I push the curve up, we're going to be adding red. So normally I pull the reds out of the shadows, and then maybe push them back in a touch. And then my greens, I normally pull down, push some magenta into the shadow areas, and a little bit of green back into the highlights. So obviously if I pull the blue channel down in the shadows, I'm going to be adding yellow, and if I push them up, I'm going to be adding blue. So I think just a tiny bit of yellow in there just to give it that summery feel. So as you can see, it gives me that first layer of color contrast. Next up, I'm going to do the color balance. So I'm going to affect how much of each of these colors is pushed into the shadows, midtones and highlights. So I always start with shadows. I tend to like pushing a little bit of cyan in, maybe a little bit of magenta and a little bit of blue. So midtones, I think I want to come a little bit to the red, a little bit to the yellow, maybe, no, doesn't really need any magentas. Then the highlights you tend to, I tend to just use the yellow slider just to pump a little bit of yellow into those highlights and level them off a bit. Okay, that's color balance done. So the next thing I'm gonna do is come down here, and I'm gonna add my gradient map. So a gradient map is another great tool of affecting the color shift within your image and pushing different colors into your shadows, midtones and highlights. And obviously you can add points and take away points. So again, if you don't understand gradient maps and you're not okay using them, then leave me a comment below and let me know that, and I can look into making a film about gradient maps and explain them in more depth to you. And come to our red, and what I'm gonna do here is probably, I'm gonna keep some quite earthy tones. So I'm gonna push the green, maybe like a dark green here, and then my midtones are going to come probably for sort of a brown. Remember, we're going for that, it's quite a 70s sort of faded, so you can have a bit of a play with a bit more of a browny reddy colour here. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then highlights, let's go just a little lighter on the, kind of like that there. Okay, the blend mode I normally use is soft light. Come to soft light, and then what I do is dial this all the way off and then just build it in. I normally try and keep it around 20% if I'm honest. I don't like cranking it up too high. I mean, that effect is so strong. Let's go for about 22%. It's looking good. So before, after, before, after. So the next thing we're going to do is come up to our HSL adjustment layer. I don't tend to touch the global adjustment on this. I go into individual colors, and then just, first of all, I'll go to the saturation and see how much saturation it needs. So I reckon add a little bit on that. I might have a little play with the hue. Don't want to play with it too much. Okay, what's the yellow doing? Yellow mainly background. Might shift the yellows ever so slightly towards the reds, ever so slightly, just to start tying that in. Greens, okay, I'm actually going to desaturate the greens a little bit. I don't feel like it needs it. Okay, whereas, okay, cyans are going to be quite strong here because of the dress. So I might actually desaturate that, and I might shift the hue. Yeah, I kind of like that more, pushing it more towards like a tealy look. Blues, what are the blues going to be affecting? And you've seen me do this before. I just grab the saturation slider and I pump it up and down, and that's just so I can see very quickly which parts of the image I'm affecting. So blue, really, I'm going to desaturate because blue's affecting nothing in the actual focus point of this portrait. It's affecting more of the background. And then magenta, this is obviously going to affect the flowers in the foreground, so we need to be a little bit because they're blurred out, you can see they break up very quickly if you pump too much of an effect in. I'm going to saturate them quite a lot because I quite like the effect of those flowers. That's part of the reason I like this portrait. And then let's have a little look at, I actually think bringing them back towards the pinks there. Okay, great, so that's our HSL layer. So if I take that off and take that on again, you can see we've now started playing with the hue, saturation and luminance of those colors. And then the final element to my coloring is to come to selective color. I'll come up to red, and what I'm now going to do is dial in each color. So I've got a whole other video just on selective color, which I'll link up in the card above here. So if you're really interested in what selective color is, you can go and check that out. But for now, I'm going to crack on, get the selective color element done, and I'll join you after I've done that. Okay, so we've just finished our selective color adjustment then. So if I take this off and then on again, you can see the difference I've made. I've just really twisted those colors into how I wanted it to view. And that predominantly is my color work done in those 5 steps. So what I'll do is select these 5 layers, group them together, call these color adjustments. And if I take all the color adjustments off, this is how we started after our base layer. And this is where we've ended up. So you can see we've really manipulated those colors and really dialed that image in with the colors alone. So now what I'm going to move on to is my contrast. So the first thing I like to do with my contrast is actually apply a black and white adjustment layer. And what I'm going to do here is dial in my contrast with the black and white adjustment layer and then move that to another blend mode. I've actually got another video solely about this, so I'll link that again up in the card up here, so you can go away and have a look at that in your own time if you want that explained to you. So, but for now, let's just get this dialed in, brighten that up, that looks nice. And like I said in that previous video, if you haven't watched it, is you're looking to really create some contrast in the image. Come down here, and then we're going to turn this to soft light. It's a very strong effect, so we're going to dial it all the way off and then just build that effect back in. About 25%, that looks good. Okay, so let's do before and after, just to dial that first layer of contrast in. Then what I'm going to do is come to my adjustments, add a curves layer. Now, I tend to see how this looks. I can either leave it in the normal blend mode or I'll come to luminosity. I tend to go to luminosity because I just want to affect the luminance of the colors. I don't want to affect things like the saturation, the hue or anything like that. I just want to affect the contrast between these colors without bumping up saturation and anything like that. So I might lift the shadows a little bit, just because we are going for that vintage sort of 70s kind of look. We don't want to go too dark. And this is actually part of the reason, I don't know if you've noticed in my films, I edit on a white background canvas, because I used to edit on a black canvas, and I found that although I really enjoyed the images I was getting, they were very dark for places like Instagram. They would come out really, really dark and moody. And I actually found by changing the canvas to white, because obviously Instagram is a white background and that's predominantly where most of my images end up, that helped me get the right brightness levels for platforms like that. So this is a very specific way of making sure that your images are bright enough for the platform you're using. Okay, so that's our curves layer done, so that's before and that's after. So the next thing I may do, I normally try this just to see how it affects the image, is just the levels and the gamma. Sometimes the mid-tones can get a little bit dark, but especially as we're going for a bit of that faded look, I don't mind pulling down the gamma a little bit. And you can see on my histogram here, I'm still clipping those highlights, but that's, like we've said before, that's in the minivan and the sky up here, so that's okay. And then we're nowhere near the black, so what you can do is bring your black level up to meet the edge of the curve. Now for me, that's gone too dark. We've obviously lifted those shadows in a previous step, so I might dial these back. I actually quite like where it is anyway, and I quite like it about there. So that's my levels. Now for contrast, typically that's where I leave it. So I'll take these 3 layers, add a folder, contrast adjustments. Okay, so if I take this folder on and off with all our contrast adjustments in, you can see that's how we started and that's how we finished. So again, we're just sort of bringing that image together, and then sometimes, like so, this is actually now looking a little bit bright for me. When you take them all off from where we started to where we ended, I think that's a bit too strong. So then you can dial back the entire folder. So all the adjustments within that folder you can dial back and then build it back in. So maybe around 70%. Let's see that before and after. Yeah, that's looking a lot nicer, a lot more natural. Okay, what I'm now going to do is move into my live adjustment layers. And this is for things like my clarity and for my high pass. Normally I'll do this clarity on a mask because obviously it can affect the skin tone. So if I bump clarity to 100%, you can see what it's doing to Freya's skin there. Let's just zoom in so we can see. Okay, it's really bringing out too much detail and it's breaking up the skin. It looks horrible, and it's very easy, I think, for beginners to crank that. I know I did when I began this. You crank that clarity slider out because it's a really cool effect. But the longer you edit and the more you look at other people's work, you're like, actually clarity can very quickly destroy all the hard work you've sort of put in. So I don't mind adding a little bit of clarity, probably, yeah, around 9%. And I think for this image, I quite like what it's doing as a global adjustment. So I'll probably leave it there. I won't put it on a mask. Sometimes what you can do is you can invert the clarity layer and then paint it on as a mask, and you can paint on things like the hair or any aspects of the image you think are looking good. But for the moment, I think actually just adding a little bit of clarity to the whole image is okay. So what I'm now going to do is come to my live adjustments again, and we're going to go to high pass. We're going to bump the radius up. And now what we're looking for is, what we don't want is any haloing. So haloing is if I bump this all the way up, I'll do it too much to start with. You can see now where it started getting brighter, because what this is also doing is going to add some contrast as well with sharpening. But you can see where these areas have started getting brighter, and that's called haloing, and we want to avoid that, and 25 pixels is for way too much. So normally I'm looking probably for an image like this around 3, maybe 2.5, 3. So around 2.7. What I then do is change the blend mode to overlay, and then we can cancel that off. So what's happened now is that high pass filter is being applied to the entire image, but that's not something that I like to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert the layer, and what I'm then going to do is pick the bits of the image I want to highlight and accentuate the most. I'm going to paint those bits of the image in with the sharpness. So I don't actually use my drawing tablet for this either. I come to the brush, the flow comes to 100%, hardness comes to about 15%. Make sure we're on white, and then we're going to zoom all the way in. So what parts of the image am I sharpening? So I'm looking at the eyes, so I'm just going to sharpen up the eye, the actual eye itself, and then around the eyes, the eyebrows. We'll put a sweep across each eyebrow. Okay, and all I use the sharpening for is, like I said, to accentuate those features. And what that also has the effect of doing is softening the skin. So we're also going to do around the edge of the nose and the nostrils, the lips especially. Again, the reason I don't use the pen on this is just because I'm using the flow at 100%. I don't need to layer this effect in. I want it full wax straight away. And then what I normally do is just a sweep across the chin as well, just to tighten up that chin line. That can really like sort of give the face some shape. If I want to accentuate a certain bit of hair, I'll do it. But in this, because the hair's a bit wild, I think what I'll do is probably just do a sharpness sweep across all of the hair, just to really bring out the detail in the hair. Hair's a really good thing to add sharpness to. It can really sort of add the detail to your image, but just be careful you don't overdo it. Sometimes I'll do the hair on a separate high pass layer, just so that if I'm getting haloing in the hair, you can do it in a separate layer, and that will stop that happening. You can do it at a different sharpness level. Into this hair, and then this final strand here. And then what I'll do is I'll put these into their own folder. So these will be my live adjustment layers. And I reckon this image could probably do with a vignette. So then what I'll do is come up here to a curves layer. I'll change the blend mode to multiply. I'm then gonna invert that mask. I'm gonna come over here to our paintbrush tool, and then need to change my settings back because I'm gonna use the pen for this. I'll bring my flow back down to 1. Hardness at 0, make sure my flow jitter is at 100%. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is make a nice big brush and maybe zoom out just a touch, because I find it a little bit easier around there. And then what I do is start in the corners, and obviously the advantage of the pen is that I can layer this in by starting each corner. And by hand painting a vignette in, you can enhance everything a little bit more, because obviously a vignette, typically if you add the effect in, is very symmetrical, whereas this, I can move that vignette in and out and really close in on and highlight the areas of the image I want my viewer to focus on, which is obviously in this case Freya's face is what the focus is. And don't worry if it looks too dark, because all we're going to do is, same as all the other effects we do, is make the effect and then dial it back so it looks a bit more natural and a bit more how we want it to look. And you can see I'm actually bringing the vignette in quite close here. I'm not too afraid of bringing that vignette nice and close into what I want to highlight, because I know I'm going to dial it back a bit. So then we come up to our curves and we can take this all the way to 0 and just build it back. So that's before and after. So we're just closing that image and we're making Freya in the middle of the focal point. And so for me, this image now is complete. If this was a studio photo I'd taken, so I'd used my flashes and I'd shot it in the perfect lighting conditions, I would then maybe add something like a film grain or a texture overlay. That's something I like to do, just to give the finished article a bit more of a crunchy look. But it's not something I tend to do with my outdoor or sort of natural light photography, just because it doesn't really fit. And so obviously what I would do from here is save and export the image. So let's have a look at the before and after of the whole image, shall we? So if we highlight all these layers and take it back to the start. And so this is the image we brought in from the develop persona. And obviously we then did our cleanup. So we'll click that layer on. And so within this layer, we've got our inpainting, skin cleanup, hair removal, frequency separation, which then included 2 sets of dodging and burning. So 1 set just for the face. I then did a little bit of healing because it made the eye sockets a little bit too harsh. And then another dodge and burn layer for the whole image. And then we added a tone map. So that's what I class as my base adjustments. And that gets me to a point where I've manipulated the photo, I've taken things out, I've added things in. If I did liquefy, if I wanted to manipulate how things looked in that aspect, that would go in that layer. After that, it's just colors, contrast, and live adjustment layers. Okay, next we moved on to our color adjustments, which is how we got to here. So this is before and this is after. And as you can see from my color adjustments, my 5-stage color adjustment. So we've got our curves adjustment, which remember is our RGB curves. And then our color balance, so what colors are we pushing into our shadows, midtones, and highlights. So we then did our gradient map adjustment, which again is the same, pushing colors that we want to see into the shadows, midtones, and highlights. We then did our HSL adjustment, so we played around with how much saturation, how much of each color did we want to see, and the hues of those. And then our selective color, which is probably our biggest jump. Selective color is how we really dial in the colors you now see here and how we wanted the image to look. Yeah, the color is a big step, the big 5-stage step, but that really transforms the image and allows us then to move on to working with the contrast. So this was how we left it after the colors, and then once we added the contrast in, and we're really just sorting out the dark and the light elements of the photo, bringing out any features again that we want to see. Then we moved on to our live adjustment layer. So now we want to start highlighting different aspects of that image. What do I want the viewer to be looking at? Well, I want the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth to be highlighted. So we turned that on. We added a little bit of clarity as well, just to sharpen that image up. And then finally we added a slight vignette, just to go with the theme of that sort of 70s boho style. And then it just focuses the viewer's eye on Freya's face and eyes. That's the final product. So I really hope you enjoyed today's talk-through. I know it was a bit of a longer one, but I've been getting a lot of people asking me to go through my entire workflow for a portrait edit. This is obviously an edit that I did for a natural light photograph that had no flashes or any sort of external lighting. I just used what I had there on the day, just me and the camera. So I will do another version of this for my studio work. I'd love to hear from you in the comments and hear about your experiences with your workflow. Do I do anything different to you? Do you do anything different to me? Of course, if you've enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing to the channel. But that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the film, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.